This is BankCents, the podcast that makes sense of all things banking. If there's something you don't understand about banking or finances, you're not alone. Our industry experts are bringing you informative and enjoyable conversations that break down bank jargon and dive into hot-button financial topics. And now, BOS, a community bank located across Illinois and Missouri, presents BankCents. Here's your host, Greg Marantz.
Hello, and welcome back to BankCents, the podcast that makes sense of all things banking. I'm your host, Greg Marantz, Executive Vice President here at the Bank of Springfield. And on today's episode, I'm excited to talk to you about agricultural and recreational land financing. For today's episode, I'm excited to bring on one of our resident experts, Diane Blickhan, who's Vice President over in our Quincy market. Diane, welcome.
Thank you for letting me attend today.
Yeah, we're excited to have you on and excited to learn a little bit more about, farm ground and recreational ground financing. But before we dive into that topic, tell our listeners a little bit about yourself, how long you've been in the bank, and then how long you've been in banking, and if you have some farming background you want to pass along as well.
Of course. So I have been with BOS for the past 6 years, banking 20 plus years, so don't do the math, so then you know how old I am. I do have a farming background. That's where my family, we're still row crop farmers, cattle, as well as home builders, so we've kind of got the best of both worlds, having the financial side plus the real life experience that a lot of our customers kind of expect. Yeah. You've seen the ups and downs. You understand the worries. So a lot of our customers appreciate that.
Yeah, and I think that experience that you have, in addition to the rest of our team as well, a lot of them have that background, really helps us provide a value add to our customers as well as 100%. We're guiding them through their process. So if you haven't picked up on it yet, we're going to be focusing at this episode, obviously a lot on farmers, but also investors that might be looking into getting into farm ground as an investment, or hunters that might want to get into rec ground or stuff like that. So this episode is a little more targeted than some of our other episodes, but it's really fascinating hearing all the different options that are out there for these financing opportunities. So without further ado, let's dive in. And I think one of the first topics we want to hit on is one of the most important things to do, and we talk about this in some of our other episodes as well, is that you want to be the most educated borrower you can be in these situations. And can you explain a little bit more about what we mean by that?
Sure. So you need to find credible sources and not just rely directly on your banker. They don't know everything. They don't know your overall financial condition. They don't know what you have upcoming. So you really need to do your due diligence before you look at what you want to do. Do you want to expand an operation? Do you want to diversify your portfolio and get into farm ground, or do you want to buy recreational ground to get that 10-point buck? Mm-hmm. But you also need to know is, Greg, you've been in banking many years too. The products have changed. The players have changed. You just don't go and find a typical adjustable loan, which, again, going back to your knowledge, if you know what these products mean, but you've got to look at long-term financing. You've got to know what the cost is to buy this asset. Also, you've got to utilize your platforms. Is there 1031 exchanges involved? Does your land base, does this make sense to buy something? But you have to come in with the knowledge of what you want to do, not what someone can tell you to do. One of the biggest things that scares me is when someone comes in or calls me and asks me, what can you afford? I can't tell you what you can afford. Mm-hmm. I can tell you what you're eligible for, but I can't tell you what you're comfortable for and what you want to do. But then a lot of this comes down to, again, knowing that there's government agencies. Don't freak out when you hear the word government, because with BOS, we are a preferred lender for the FSA. We go to bat for you. But if we don't know this is something you want to do, we can't pull the information out. You've got to come to us.
And for some of our listeners out there that might not be as familiar with some of these topics, when we've heard of the FSA, we're referring to the Farm Service Agency.
Yes.
And you also mentioned 1031 exchanges. I just want to briefly touch on that. And that is typically when you see a client that might sell a piece of ground, and instead of paying taxes on the gain that they might make on that ground, they're going to use that gain and take it in and go buy another property.
And that is with the land market, how competitive the land market is right now. 1031 exchanges, folks are really using that caveat to build a better land base. But again, if you don't know the terms, you can come in and sit with one of our experienced credit analysts, loan officers, but you're going to get a deer in the headlight look. Yeah, you've got to have an idea of what you're looking to do and know what you're doing, and then you're coming to a credible source. You're coming to the Bank of Springfield to look at guidance. Okay, I have put this in my cash flow. I have looked at my operation. What is going to be the best part for me? Because your interest is the cost of borrowing.
Yeah.
And the interest expense is so minor in the grand scheme of things. It is so minor. It really is.
Yeah, and like you said, it's important to obviously leverage the contacts you have that understand your full financial position. But then when you come and talk to us, we have those array of options that we can find the right fit for you. And I think it's one thing that we at the bank do well, not just on the ag financing side or the ground financing side, but in our financial advising department and everything. It's not a one-size-fits-all approach. Every person has a unique circumstance that might make one of the agencies, like a Farmer Mac, for example, which is one of those government agencies you talked about, a fit for you, but maybe not a fit for me. And so when we look at that approach holistically, we can help find the right fit for you once we understand really what your goals are.
Well, and we utilized BOS's investment services team. They may have funds, cash available that they need to put somewhere. Okay, buy ground. You don't always have to use the ground as collateral. I mean, you can make things an a la carte instead of just literally thinking if I buy ground, the ground's collateral, and I put down my 20%. That's really a thing of the past. It really is. And if you can utilize the programs like the FSA, Farmer Mac, even private equity insurance companies, they're in the game. They understand it's a profitable industry. They don't make any more ground, farm ground, recreational ground. These are investments, and they're making good money on them. So they're now in the game, and they're offering competitive rates. So we have to be competitive. So that's why we have to see what tools we have in our tool belt that we can offer customers so they can make an educated decision on how to buy ground.
Yeah, and as you mentioned, that long fixed term rate is huge if you're able to get that.
Yes.
Similar to like when you buy a house, you want a fixed term rate on your house because you want to have that certainty for the next 30 years or however
You know
long
your
it's gonna
devil.
be. Yep.
You know what that payment obligation is. You know what this is going to cost you. Is this worth the interest expense for me to buy this? Does it work in my operation? It doesn't matter if it's a house, a car, or land.
Now, we talked about, those long fixed-term rates, but sometimes there's not fixed-term rates. So you may have, a piece of ground out there right now that you own, and you might have a balloon payment on it, which means, obviously, you closed on the loan, and 5 years later, it's due again, and you have to refinance. So tell us a little bit about what you have to think about when you're potentially refinancing some of that ground.
So let's go back. What happened in 2020? COVID. Rates plummeted. Folks were buying and refinancing ground, and a lot of them are on traditional balloons, like you said, mature, or they're in ARMs where you still have up to a 30-year term of amortization, but every 5 years your rate's subject to change. We are in 2025. You're not seeing the 3.25 rates.
Yep.
Let's see, prime was what, 3.25-ish back then.
Yep.
Now we're 7.25. So these rates are now adjusting, and they're more than doubling what their rate is, what they had 5 years ago. Right now is the time to take advantage of some of these fixed rates to where you're not going in at a 7% for the next 5 years. I mean, that can jump your payment dramatically, and you may not be able to afford the asset anymore. I mean, we saw that happen with the mortgage crisis. A lot of adjustable rates aren't always the best product to buy real estate. It's really it's mitigating your interest rate risk. What can you afford?
Yep.
So with these balloons and ARMs adjusting, getting to your bank, getting to a BOS credit analyst or loan officer that's going to go through, okay, we can now put you into a fixed rate. We can get you into a more secure product so you don't have that anxiety in the next 5 years of what's it going to be.
Just helping create a little more certainty.
Yes, in a very uncertain world.
Exactly.
A very uncertain world. And everything's more expensive, just in general. It doesn't matter if you buy shoes for your kid or go to the dentist, everything's more expensive. So if you have these large real estate assets, if you can put them in a conduit that allows you to have a fixed rate or even a better rate than you currently would have just on a traditional adjustable, you need to do it. You got to help yourself, but you got to make the first move.
Yeah,
and you got to make the first move.
And I want to keep drawing back to this, but every time we talk about this, you got to think back. You're looking at this holistically, looking at everything that's going on too, because when people are buying ground, it can be for a multitude of different reasons. It can be for trying to get that 10-point buck that you mentioned, or it can be just as an investor thinking you're going to get that appreciation of that ground over the next 10 to 20 years. And you might cash rent out that ground, but typically that cash rent is probably not going to service the debt on that ground.
Well, and I'm just going back to our investment services side again. We're in a multi-generation industry when it comes to farmland. We now have the older generation that's trying to exit. I call them snowbirds. They're wanting to go spend the summers, or the winters when it's not 30 below. So now they're trying to transition the next generation. you're a numbers guy. You can see, you can lose if you don't do it properly. And using some of these caveats to have them buy ground from their grandparents is huge. It's not always about gifting. It's not wait until you do pass away. You've got to make a very strategic plan to do this.
And I think that brings us into one of our reoccurring themes that we have on the podcast, and that's to don't be afraid to ask the question, and don't have too much pride to think that you might know everything. Don't be afraid to ask for help. We don't know everything. You as a borrower don't know everything. So don't be afraid to ask that next question.
And that's the big thing is you have to have confidence in yourself, and it's okay not to know. Actually, I appreciate it when folks come in and they think that any question is dumb. There's no such thing as a dumb question. I know that sounds like a cliche, but at least have the peace of mind. Yep. Coming in, they're not sure where they're sitting at. Okay, they fill out a balance sheet. They think their ground is still worth X amount of dollars when in all reality, we see a lot of land transactions. We see a lot of movement. So we're able to better guide them on, okay, how can we make your land work for you? Do you want to buy that place in Florida? Do you have a lot of additional income? You're very liquid. Well, then if you want to diversify your portfolio, let's look at ground. I'm a big land person, very, very big land person. So that's where I always kind of swing back to. But if you don't ask the questions, we don't know. We don't know that you want to find a property that's got a machine shed on it. We don't know that you want strictly tillable. But a lot of times, folks just they think they know, and then when it comes after the fact, which is kind of a sad story, we were talking about the adjustables. If you don't ask all the questions when you did your loan 5 years ago, you don't know that it was adjustable. You may not know there's a prepayment penalty. Yeah. You may not know that you don't have the flexibility you thought you once did. Things aren't handshakes anymore. They aren't. Everything needs to be, so you've got to ask questions. You've got to understand what you're doing.
Yep. And I know that's one thing that we do really well at the bank is we're always communicating that information to our borrowers. That doesn't mean necessarily that everyone's communicating that information to their borrowers. But you're right. It's really important to ask all those questions and don't feel stupid asking them because that can help you out a lot when you're going down the line. And if this is part of your retirement plan or part of your succession planning or whatever it might be, if you're not asking those right questions at the right time, then it could really get you in a bind.
Yeah. And again, a lot of the times when we're looking at ground, it is for net worth. People are building a great balance sheet, and that's wonderful, but balance sheet equity doesn't pay the bills. Yep. So when folks call and they say, well, I've got an amazing balance sheet, I've got a $10 million net worth, but they got $10,000 in the bank, what can I do for you if you can't pay for it?
Yep.
So again, going back to ask the questions, how can I buy ground? How can I put myself in a better position to buy ground and utilize the platforms that are out there? Not many people understand about Farm Services Agency, the FSA. They think it's for beginning farmers. Not so much. People don't think of MetLife. They think of MetLife as life insurance, not knowing it's one of the major players when it comes to financing farmland and rec ground. There's a lot of options out there, but you need to be able to just accept that you don't know, ask the questions, and you will feel far more comfortable after you leave with talking with one of our loan officers or credit analysts. You will.
Yeah, and I liked your comment you made about how the equity in your land doesn't pay your bills or stuff like that. And it's funny when you think about farm ground, and a lot of times people are buying pieces of ground that are millions of dollars at times. But when you think back to the basics and some of the episodes that we've had on basic budgeting, it's not too different from that. It's on a larger scale, right? But it's thinking about those same basics and like, okay, what makes the most sense for my position that I'm in? So, Diane, I really appreciate you coming on the podcast today and providing this information to our listeners. For some of our listeners, it's probably a topic they don't know a lot about. And for some of our listeners, it gives them a little more insight to the farm world. And for some that are in that world, I think it gives them some really valuable information. Is there any other tips or tricks or anything you kind of want to leave them with today?
I would just say is know your portfolio. And that's your overall portfolio. Know your assets. Know when your assets expire. Also know when your debts expire. Going back to rates, adjustables. But the two best people you can always have is a good attorney and a good accountant. And that kind of wraps up again your financial advisor. It really does, because the bank can only do so much. We don't always know when it comes to buying ground. We don't know if that's the best option for you. Yeah. But it makes it a more streamlined approach, or to give us a better direction to help you on buying ground and best options if you know where you're at. Where are you at in life? Are you wanting to grow? Are you a young family, 2 kids? Or are you 80 years old and you're trying to move to that next phase where you don't have to work 80 hours a week? But you've got to have a very strong support team behind you. Yep. And don't think you got to do it all on your own, because you don't. Yeah, you don't.
Yeah, there's a lot of people out there that can help and do it in the right way as well. Yeah, Diane, thanks again for coming on. We really appreciate you coming and talking to our listeners about all the different products that are out there and what to really think about if you're interested in buying, farm ground or rec ground or whatever it might be. I think it really provides them some very valuable insight that they can take and use in their everyday lives. So we really appreciate you coming on.
Thanks for the invitation.
If you have any additional questions for Diane or part of our ag team, please go on to bankwithbos.com or reach us at 217-529-5555, or there's additional contact information in the description below. As always, thanks for listening to BankCents, the podcast that makes sense of all things banking. Until next time.
Is there something about banking that doesn't make sense to you? Submit your questions to us on Instagram Messenger or by email, BankCents@bankwithbos.com. Or if you're watching this on YouTube, comment below. We're happy to give you our 2 cents on a wide range of topics. Thank you for listening on Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts. And please leave us a 5-star rating and review so we can continue to bring you more educational content. Thank you for listening, and we hope you join us on the next episode of BankCents.